Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the overall economic situation. To start off with, amidst a lot of default propaganda coming from the opposition, the government's efforts to stabilize things, overall sustainable solutions being sought, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the efforts of the Prime Minister, of his economic team, and the work towards long-term solutions rather than trying to get short-term benefit or short-term solutions that were earlier sought. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about, of course, long-term reforms which will be a step forward towards those long-term solutions that are urgently needed in Pakistan. A little later on, we'll also be talking about politics, particularly the situation in Sindh and what is likely to happen in the next couple of weeks, couple of days. Certainly, things seem to be in a flux as far as the situation in Sindh is concerned with regard to the ECP, overall MQM, all of that today on Perspective. I have with me today Mohammad Shaf Najib, who is a research fellow with BIDE. Thank you for being with us. We also have with us Dr. Hakan Najib, who is an economist. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who is a political analyst. Thank you for being with us. Ji, let me start off with you, Shaf Sab. Overall, as far as the economic situation is concerned, of course, I mean, it's no secret that we are dealing with a lot of complications. We are dealing with, challenges on a lot of fronts as far as economy particularly is concerned. How soon do you think we can move towards a kind of stable economy, a kind of solutions that are long-term rather than, short-term solutions that are going to plug in the kind of gaps that we have?
I think it's very important to assess basically why we have ended up at this position. We have been with the IMF program for 23 times, so in 75 years. So that totals about one program every 2.5 years. So the default-like situation that we continuously are talking about in the recent months, we have to realize this isn't the first time that we have ended up here. This is primarily happening every 2 to 3 years to us. And that is, of course, not a consequence of one government policies, but I think it's about recurring policies where we haven't made reforms in our governance structure, which should actually be dealing with, so that we do not end up going to the IMF asking for loans and other bilateral countries. And I think, as you pointed out, it's very important that we, of course, in the current situation, it's important that we ask IMF for the help again, but it's also important that we start reforms that will actually help us steer towards away from IMF and have sustainability in our economic policies. And for that, it's important that we have political stability in the country as well, so that the political forces and primarily through the parliament, we develop such policies that actually benefit Pakistan on a whole level, while everything else, continues to go on as it should.
Right. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Hakan Najib. Dr. Hakan, we talk about long-term solutions from time to time. We also talk about, going through the parliament and, moving towards reform, which will be a step in the right direction, a huge step. Why do you think it couldn't happen during the last government? Because, of course, we're a couple of months into this government. It's also, a government that comprises of many parties. And right now, if you talk to the government, if we talk to the economic team, it's about trying to plug in those gaps that unfortunately there are at this time, trying to deal with short-term solutions so we can move towards long-term. But why do you think it couldn't happen earlier on?
MAHRUKH, thank you for having me on your show. So the first realization we must have is Pakistan is probably going through one of the most difficult economic times I think Pakistan has ever seen. And I say that not because there is just a domestic crisis, there is a global picture also which is very tough. There is a domestic crisis, of course, of a balance of payments where we are left with less than a month of dollar reserves. There is political instability, and when you talk about the parliament, of course it's half functional because the opposition is not present. If you rewind back to the last government, I think in my view, the preparation of any party that has taken office over the last few decades, and having worked with most of them, I think that is where a lot could have been done if you have to, carve a niche for yourself to deliver. And I think that's been missing throughout. So then, once in power, they realize the difficulty of the situation, and then, of course, it's back to the IMF. And here on the IMF front also, we don't do much. We keep saying that Pakistan has done 22 programs and we are in the 23rd. That is a complete misnomer in Pakistan.
Okay.
Pakistan has never done 22 programs. Pakistan has only done one program in its history, and that was the 2016 program that was rightly, as the current finance minister quotes, was completed under the PMLN government. All
Okay.
the other programs, Pakistan did enter those programs, but even our commitment to fulfill, to complete those programs was so low that after first, second, or third tranche, Pakistan came out and never actually completed the tenure of the program. So that is also a misnomer.
Okay.
Because I anchored the 2016 program with the current finance minister, so I
Okay.
very distinctly know the history.
Dr. Hakan, I
And
want to talk more about this in detail. Let me come back to you. I'm going to take Dr. Niaz's view and then I'll come back to you. Niaz Sahab, one of the reasons why we need to go back is that we need to go forward. I mean, when we saw the last government come in, and Dr. Hakan also mentioned this, of course, there was a lot that was said about economy, about plans for economy. The question is, if we haven't been able to do that during the last government, and what lessons are we going to learn and move forward, and how will we be able to do that now? Those are the important questions for us today. When we talk about reform, when we talk about economic reform, let's leave the other reforms aside for the moment. But why do you think we don't go there? Is it, I mean, of course, things are worse. The last government also said this. They said that, things were worse than what they thought. But the point is, when any government comes in and then later on, once they leave, then they say that things were great during that time that they were in power. So what is the real picture then?
Well, I mean, it's just the way our economy has developed over the decades.
Okay.
We have an economy where, a lot of, the stakeholders in the economy.
That cannot be successful, you're saying?
Sorry?
You're saying that this is just the way our economy is. I mean, is it that bad? Are we never going to be able to land on our feet?
I'm explaining that. It consists of, a lot of stakeholders who are just interested in the short term, rent-seeking kind of, returns. They are not really interested in a productive economy, think about the long-term returns, improve their productivity, improve their technological base. So a lot of investment in real estate. If you look at, two clear things, one is our taxation structure, and then the other one is the tariff structure. It's all geared towards, short-term, unproductive sectors rather than, the productive sectors that can give us long-term sustainable growth the way it is in India or Bangladesh. And those stakeholders are the same. Every government faces the same kind of stakeholders, and nobody is shown the power to be able to conquer them. Now, if we look at, the situation in this century, we've had 4 or 5 economic crises. Each government left an economic crisis for the next one, starting from the Musharraf to the PPP, PPP to PMLN, PMLN to PTI, PTI now to PMLN, whole circle. And, the crisis that the PTI inherited was the least severe of these 4 crises. And the one it left behind is the most severe. If you look at 7 or 8 factors like GDP growth, interest rate, inflation, your current account deficit, fiscal deficit, adequacy of reserves, fall in reserves in the last 6 months, fall in the currency. By every measure, what PTI got from PMLN was a fairly tame kind of a crisis. But the one that PTI has not left behind is huge. Your foreign reserves fell by 50% from beginning of September 2021 to the time that PTI left the government in April. So that's 50%. 100% from 20 billion with the state bank down to 10 billion. So that shows the enormity of the crisis. And then there was that, and then the Ukraine crisis came at the fag end of the PTI era. It did not affect the PTI government so much, but it affected the current government hugely. And then there was
Niyaz
the
Sahab,
flood.
let me come back to you on that note. Ji, Shah Sahab, is it because each government, we talk about short-term solutions, we talk about, each government is interested. Do you think it's also because it's about politics, for them? It's about electioneering, it's about those solutions they need for their, for their politics, rather than, a consideration for what is going to happen in the next 10 years, next 5 years, keeping that kind of goal in mind?
I think that's very true, because a lot of our policies during various governments have focused more on elections and rather than the people. Now, one example that I'll give is that whenever a new government comes in, they start with the sustainability program. So they try to curb expenditures, they try to have a little bit, you could say, stability in the economy. But as things go on, now they want to build some political, you could say, clout. So what they start, you could say, they start unchecked development expenditures, which actually lead on to increasing government expenditures, and we have been facing very high fiscal government deficits as well. And then that is also followed by easing up consumption imports a lot, which actually hurts our import bill and our reserves, without actually focusing on you could say developing production within the country and having exports. And that's what actually leads us to our balance of payment crisis as well. So whenever
let me on that note, let me come back to you. Dr. Khakan, what Shah Sahab is saying, I think it's really important, and I think one of the so what do we do if we remove the factor of elections? For example, the politics factor from a government. I mean, I'm just saying this. Let's imagine that one can do that. If that were to happen, do you think that there would be performance would be better? In fact, performance would be, they would be focusing on long-term goals rather than making any rash decisions, which will, give them quick brownie points with their, people, or with, of course, focusing on their performance as far as elections are concerned.
So, MAHRUKH, about 3-4 days ago, Dawn published an article that I have written. It is called Truly Unlucky. So that answers your question. Why do I say that? Because Pakistan's problem of being able to do things ourselves, besides this political instability, has gone down tremendously. Policy is largely outsourced in this country. I'll just give you an example. When we did this policy work for the floods, and we came up with the $16.3 billion in losses, and another 15 odd billion of the opportunity cost. Where was the plan vetted? Where was the plan made? You had to partner with the EU and multilaterals and all others. Most of our policy work over the years has gotten outsourced to external partners. That's why our reliance on our own ability to forge ahead has actually gone down. So besides this political instability, which keeps getting quoted a lot, I think the administrative quality, because we never actually inducted any professionals in the system, and the complexity of the issues increased manyfold. So the easier path was to rely on outside sources, whether that was multilaterals, bilaterals, or other agencies.
But Dr. Khakan, again, isn't this a circular argument then? Of course. So then, are we going to be doing the same again? Are we going to be, how do we get out of this cycle? Then if we are, because unfortunately, if we're going to have to outsource because of our limitations, right? That's in essence the problem, because we do outsource because we don't have another option, right?
So in that, then I mention some solutions also. So of course, the main solution here is going to come. I mean, decades of talking about civil services reform and not moving on that is now an untenable position. And here, when I talk about reform in Pakistan, having seen and being involved in it, you can't do a big bang reform in this country. What you can do, and I've always said, is that please add some kind of professional layers at the key ministries, whether that's finance, whether that's privatization, whether that's the energy sector, so on, where this work is very technical in nature. You cannot run these ministries by just posting in and out people who have not had the either the education or the expertise. But they are also required. I worked with all the bureaucracy. They are required to carry out the administrative work, maybe some managerial work, but it is the input that we then go on and rely, whether it's the IMF to give us a short-term solution. Let's say even if we were to agree, you and I, that IMF is the short-term solution, but then the solution is also coming from them. It should be Pakistan taking ownership of that program. Why can't you take ownership of that program? Because you cannot craft that program. 2016, and I keep saying this, was the only program out of all those was different. That program we crafted. We had a bunch of professionals, and I give credit to the government of the time that it let us craft that program. And many people don't know about this. That program was largely homegrown, and that's why we were able to do CPEC all along, and other matters.
Let me go to Dr. Niaz. I'll come back. Dr. Niaz, do you agree? You think that, there are from time to time, to a lay person who doesn't know much about economy like me, I think that, from time to time we do get those criticisms that either there's too much technical people involved or there's not enough technical people involved. Which do you think is it?
Well, no, I think the situation is that, it's a lot of, highly politicized kind of decision making that happens without, a hard look at the technical components of, the projects that are undertaken, whether, you're talking about highways, whether you're talking about power plants, whether you're talking about metro buses. You get the feeling that a lot of these projects have been chosen because of, their political viability and payoffs rather than, hard technical analysis. So we certainly need, more technical input. But then, I wouldn't go so far as to say that we need, a technocratic government. I think it has to be within a political system, but, the politicians do need to pay much more attention to, technical aspects. And I think a very good example is that from India, which I call the Congress model, where after Rajiv Gandhi's death, the Gandhi family stopped ruling. They just focused on running the party, and they appointed competent prime ministers like Narasimha Rao and then later on Manmohan Singh. And those were the two best eras economically, which have made India the global superpower that it is now becoming economically. So I think we also need something like that, a political system, but at least say finance minister and a minister of industries, investment, your commerce, human resources. We need.
You're saying all of those people should be technical people.
Well, they should have. They don't have to be technocrats. They can be politicians, but with good backgrounds in their respective fields. Because if you look at all the cabinets that you've had over the last several decades, some of the people are complete political appointees which have no background in the ministry that they are heading. So at least, within from your own parties, there are a lot of competent people, especially in PMLN and PPP. You can see what's happened with climate change, how, Shahri Rahman.
But in a sense, Niaz Sahab, do you think, I'm going to take Shah Saab's opinion on this also, but do you think that, overall for us to move forward economically, and I'd like your opinion on this. I'd like Dr. Khakan's opinion on this also, and Shah Saab's, that overall for us to have the kind of long-term solutions in economy that we need, we will have to forge ahead without necessarily looking at the political side of things as far as people are concerned, as far as the electorate is concerned, and make those tough decisions, which is what the government said in the beginning. Shah Sahib, when they came in, it was about the fact that, we have to do this because there's no other way. Do you think that's how we will have to look at it for a while, for there to be lasting solutions in economy?
Of course, right? So there's always been talk about hard decisions in politics, right? And I always say that generally politicians refer to hard decisions as maybe increasing the taxes, maybe increasing electricity prices, but those really are the easy decisions. The hard decisions, as we have talked about today, are doing reforms that are actually beneficial to the entire system so that the overall governance increases, right? And that's where I, would point out two things. Number one, first we need to change what our politics is based on. You cannot take politics out of all of this, but of course politics needs to be on policies. Politics needs to be not on development projects, it needs to be based on policies. It needs to be about who developed more better opportunities within the country, right? And secondly, as you also talked about, a technocratic government, or maybe including more technical people in government, first thing that I'd like to add on to that is that, of course, there is nothing like a technocratic government, right? The governing is the right of politicians, it is the job of politicians,
exactly.
Right? And when we talk about technocrats, we are not talking about any special kind of people. We are just talking about someone who has an expertise in some kind of field.
And I think what Dr. Khakan meant was that there should be a team of people who have technical solutions, but then of course that has to be complemented with
so basically it has to be important that we define who does what, right? So the politicians need to develop goals that they want to achieve, and then, as Dr. Khakan also mentioned, there has to be a team of technical people who have to make sure that those things are delivered, right? So basically you do not you want someone who is running, let's say, railways. That person needs to be an expert within that field, or someone running PIA needs to be an expert in that.
But isn't it the way that it's done all over the world? Let me come back to you, Dr. Khakan. The way that it's done all over the world is that you have a political person at the helm of affairs, but then his team is complemented by technical people who are then there to advise him. And then secondly, also, for us to move towards that kind of long-term solution that we seek, we will need all parties to be on one page as far as economy is concerned, as far as those policy decisions are concerned.
So MAHRUKH, even UK has, come back from where we are getting our administrative service, and they've, created an inner consulting hub where they've hired expertise to help the government move forward on issues. I've worked in Australia. It's the same pattern. There is inward and outward movement of bureaucracy as well. There is inward outward movement of technical people. That's what I'm trying to say. Eventually you would have to move to that kind of model, whereas there is intake at senior levels where people can come in for 3 to 5 years, make help. Let's say Pakistan right now needs tremendous help in the energy sector. So, you bring in people at fairly senior level who can, not only design the reform, but help the bureaucracy and take forward that reform. And that is the model which would have to be followed. As far as political leadership is concerned, they have to give a genuine vision of how they think, whether they believe in privatization, whether they believe in agriculture reforms, whether they believe in connecting Pakistan to the world. But how that has to be done has to be followed through with the kind of structure that I am pointing to. But I also keep saying, as a voter, I must ask the political parties what programs have they forged before coming into power. I think that part is also missing in the country.
Fair enough. I want to come to that. Unfortunately, we have little time. Dr. Niaz, overall, what Dr. Khakan is saying, do you think those are questions, that's a very pertinent question. What programs have political parties inculcated in their, are you saying in their manifestos, or are you saying later when they were in power, what have they done as far as economy is concerned? Do you think that the voter out there is asking that question from the opposition today?
You're asking me, or?
Ji, Niaz Sahab.
Well, yeah, there is this issue that, the voters don't ask hard questions from their politicians. And a lot of it is about, patronage kind of boreal projects that they want. So there is certainly, but then, also say from, our professional middle class, which, has higher education, what you see is, you don't see them becoming, a powerful force for positive change in the country. They're also misled by populist messages and, messiahs. They always keep chasing messiahs rather than, having hard discussions about policies and
But
being
Niasab, if we don't ask today's opposition these questions, whoever it is, if we don't ask them today what they're going to do for economy or what they did for economy or what plan they have for economy, we are invariably going to be, creating the same mess for ourselves. Isn't that true? Do you think even the educated class, like you're saying, the middle class, for example, the professionals, do you think even those professionals are asking about those questions?
Well, I haven't done like a survey throughout Pakistan, but if I look within my circles, I am a middle class person, my relatives, friends, colleagues, etc. I mean, it's all, they're driven by TV talk, low quality TV talk shows. There are good quality TV talk shows like this one. And, then social media stuff. And, you hardly find people who are, have the technical capacity to look at policies, economic policies, foreign policies, and it's all about, a lot of slogans about, breaking the shackles of slavery and this and that. You don't really find, people doing hard quality analysis that you expect from, educated people. So I think that's what we need. And then, the other.
So it has to do with education, it has to do with a more educated voter, or it has to do with, unfortunately, our voter also. We are dealing with a voter base that's not, perhaps as educated as one would like. Is it that, or do you think that we're underestimating our voter?
Well, I would say even the educated voters, don't ask these kind of questions. The uneducated, the poor people, they are driven by patronage, immediate, projects that any government can, deliver. And our educated people, instead of, being driven by policies, are driven by populism. All kind of slogans, you just spread it that, we are slaves and this and that, and people will just blindly follow that about, US conspiracies and this and that. So it's, the educated people that I am criticizing the most. You can understand.
Unfortunately, yes, you're right. Let me go to Mohammed Shafsab. Shafsab, your comments, unfortunately, and then we'll move, we have little time, so I want to move on towards the politics.
Right. So, of course, I think as Dr. Niaz also pointed out, this demand has to come also from the voters. But we need to differentiate between education and awareness. This isn't as much an education problem. It's more like an awareness problem. And I think professionals like ourselves and as well as politicians, it is upon them to actually create further awareness among the people as well about what their rights are, how to demand, the right policies from them. Of course, this also is due to the fact that there is a very you could say gap between the voter and the people that are being voted for, and hence our talks within the political atmosphere, and then of course our policies are more focused on populist policies rather than, you could say, those that are actually going to help Pakistan. So there has to be a change in our attitudes and change in our behaviors if we have to redirect our focus.
Right. On that note, we'll be taking a short break and we'll come back and talk about the political side of things as far as Sindh is concerned, Karachi, and how the situation is likely to change and whether it is likely to change at all. All of that today in a little bit.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid Bhatt.
When we write something, we share our vision.
This is a very good opportunity to discuss everything.
It was devastating to see the impact of these monsoon floods.
250 recommendations were given to India from various member states, and unfortunately only around 152, 153 were implemented.
Germans are very straight people. They generally have a positive impression about Pakistan.
The longer the president postpones the establishment of a new government, the greater the problem that we are facing in Sri Lanka today.
Outcomes that we are looking through RAST is greater engagement of women.
Don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone with others. Unfold your own myth.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Dine with World. We have some cold recipes, salads, juices. We're also making a pasta, my favorite segment of the show, sweets and desserts. 3 teaspoons of mojito syrup, ice cubes, lemons. Very nice red vinegar. Good. This is really nice. This is our beetroot salad, which is ready to be served. You can make, I think, hundreds of sauces. Yum, yum, yum. Scallops, mussels. I love this about Thai food. Red chilies and everything. You don't want it to burn.
Done.
Wow. Just like the name is very explicit, so seafood lovers don't really care what expressions the fish is giving. So we've also added chicken base.
Yeah, you need naturalized.
Welcome back. We're going to move on and talk about the political situation in Karachi. We have with us Ali Rashid from the PPP. Ji, Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ali, what is the overall situation as far as the by-polls now with your coalition partners also? Because as I understand, there were reservations as far as the delay in the local polls is concerned. Where does the PPP stand now?
I think we've always been ready to go ahead with the polls, but our partners had some issues with the delimitations. But I think it's a bit too late now to address those, and those issues can be addressed by the Election Commission. And being their partners with MQM, what we could do is we wrote to the Election Commission requesting them to consider whatever reservations our partners had. But the Election Commission, the ECP, has rejected those our application and is saying that now we need to go ahead with the elections tomorrow. So we are prepared, and I think the elections will be happening now.
So what is the MQM now planning? Is it going to boycott these elections? And what kind of reaction do you expect in terms of, from your voters at all? Is the PPP, of course, you're going ahead, but overall, what, in your opinion, how is the party position likely to be affected at all? Of course, they will not be in the running.
Well, I don't know if they're in the running or not. They haven't announced it as yet, but I think they may boycott it, and they've also, I think, discussed it with the federal government, and they have also said that if these elections do happen tomorrow, then they might reevaluate their decision to be part of the federal government, which is a bit concerning because the number game is such that if they withdraw, then
But you're saying that you don't have, I mean, of course, the PPP is unable to sway the Election Commission at this time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I don't understand that why are they reacting this way, but they're very hell-bent upon that elections should not happen on the 15th, which is...
Is it because
tomorrow.
they're not, I mean, is it because of, is it a performance issue as far as the MQM is concerned? Do you think that they feel that perhaps they're not prepared? It's about preparedness. What in your opinion, of course, I realize you have no way of knowing, but what is your opinion on this?
100%. I think, as you know, that a lot of factions of the MQM were not together till like 2 days back, which they've reorganized and they've joined hands. So prior to that, MQM was on a very weak wicket, and because if you see these elections with these current delimitations were supposed to happen 6 months back, technically, and they kept.
There's been, you know, a recurrent delay, of course.
Yeah, they kept being delayed. So what I don't understand is if there were issues, why weren't they addressed earlier? And this kind of aggressive response which we're getting from MQM regarding if the elections happen, they'll quit the coalition government, they will not, you know, whatever. Why did they not like bring this up earlier? Because they've been having numerous meetings with the PPP earlier in the past 6 months. I do understand they may have mentioned it, but now that right before elections, like maybe right 3-4 days before elections, they're expecting the Election Commission to, you know, re-evaluate the decision and not have elections. Now all the ballot papers have been printed, all the, you know, everything is there, and we as a part, although we want these elections to happen, PPP is fully prepared, and we've been prepared for the past 6 months. We want these elections to happen, but yet we are bound, you know, if our partners are unhappy with anything, then obviously we have to do whatever we could. So
Ali, please stay with us. I'll come back to you. Please stay with us. We have Rafiq Rajwana Saab, former governor of Punjab, with us. Ji, Rafiq Saab, can you hear me?
Yes.
Rafiq Saab, overall, in terms what's happening in Karachi, in terms of coalition, of course, it's coalition with PPP, MQM, particularly in Sindh also. Overall, how do you see this situation? Is it concerning? Do you think that it's likely that there will be, you know, some breakthrough with the MQM? How do you look at this?
It's my observation that because of the differences in between MQM and Pakistan People's Party on the issue of local body election, regarding delimitation of union councils, disproportionate to the population as they allege. But one thing is clear under the law, once the election schedule has been announced, then no changes in the limitation can take place. Even you might be knowing, and the viewers also might be knowing, that even any transfer cannot take place during the period when the election schedule has been announced. Transfer of the government, transfer and posting of the government servants. So under the law, the Election Commission of Pakistan, under Article 218 of the Constitution and the further onward provisions of the Constitution, Election Commission is a constitutional body, and they are independently responsible to hold the election, whether the local bodies or the general elections or the by-elections. So they in their own have exclusive constitutional jurisdiction, subject to if some Superior Court.
So what is
stops them.
behind this? I mean, of course, you're also saying this, and Ali Rashid before you also said that it's about it's under the purview of the Election Commission. They're fully empowered, to act as far as delimitation is concerned. And it is their purview, it is their authority. Why is this becoming a bone of contention, in your opinion, then?
Actually, the MKM is showing its reservation, but I think they are late. Because they are referring to the judgment of the Supreme Court in these cases. As far as I recall and I know and I have read, I hope that was the direction to the petitioners to MKM to approach the Election Commission of Pakistan. The Supreme Court didn't say that your petition is accepted and delimitation is satisfied and then approach the Election Commission of Pakistan. Just it simply said they go to the proper forum.
Right.
They went to the proper forum and a decision was made by the Election Commission of Pakistan. The schedule was already announced, and then they, I think, as far as I remember, they went to the Honorable Sindh High Court. Then the question came, if I recall, subject to my correction, that the election schedule has been announced, no order can be passed to stop the election. Once the constituency has been called for election and the dates have been given for different process till the day of election and final result. And I think that these differences may cause a dent in the coalition government, which we call it PDM.
So you don't think it's likely that you can, I mean, overall, as far as the PPP is concerned, there can be, those reservations can be allied at this later stage?
I think they can. I was just watching the television. There was a news offer. It is correct. You might be knowing better that the MQM is thinking about to leave the PDM, to quit the PDM, and they have asked for resignations of their members in the parliament.
So you're saying that it's unlikely that there can be some breakthrough at this late stage? Do you think the bypolls, of course, let me come back to you, Rafiq Sahab, I'll go to Ali. Ali, so the bypolls will go forward as scheduled tomorrow. And you're saying that the PPP is prepared and you expect to do very well.
Yes, indeed. We are. It's happening tomorrow, and we are ready. And actually, we've been ready for the past 6 months. And to be honest with you, all the UC people who were actually contesting elections were pretty sick and tired of the delay, because when you're actually running an election campaign, maximum you can do it for a month or 2 months, but they've been doing it for the past 6 months. So they're like, it's about time that we get this election done and over with. And PPP has fielded more candidates in this election than any other party. And there are seats which we have already won unopposed from District Korangi and District Kimari and a few other places. So we are very happy and confident with our reps.
But what about other party positions? What about PTI, for example? They, of course, have been trying to make inroads into Sindh, into Karachi. What is their, in your opinion, what is their position as far as the local polls go?
Well, I've been privy to the information, and I've been since I've been overlooking the elections, and I've been given the responsibility. So I'm very closely monitoring all the parties which are participating. So PPP is the one which is campaigning and canvassing and going door to door and doing as much as they can. It's the most visible party. When it comes to MQM, and MQM is just like absent. We don't see them on ground. They're not actually carrying out a campaign. Maybe they were under the impression that the elections would be delayed again. So they haven't done any work. Then there's PTI. PTI again has just recently started campaigning, but they're again counting on the popular vote of Imran Khan, and the way they operate, they usually don't do much of a campaign. They just expect people to come out because of Imran Khan. Jamaat-e-Islami, on the other hand, has been pretty active. but more so on social media and on TV channels than on ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. Rajmana Sahab, your quick comments overall, you know, in terms of political stability, do you think there's a chance that things can, you know, move in that direction, or you think it's too late for that now?
It's too. I think that the stability of the country, purely on economic side, is not possible in the given circumstances in hodgepodge manner. Somewhere the assemblies are being dissolved, the other these rifts in the local body election. Actually, the election should be convened and held in a smooth and fair play and level playing field. That's not the situation, but all the parties have to think about it.
Right, of course, and as far as the PMLN, of course, is concerned, you know, Nawaz Sharif Sahab has now asked your party to get ready for elections in Punjab. Am I correct?
Constitutionally, the assemblies have been dissolved, and we have to be ready for the election. And every political party is supposed to be ready for the elections. Every political worker, anytime
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us, Rafiq Rajmana Sahab. Thank you for your very valuable time. Ali Rashid, thank you for being with us. Overall, as far as the political situation is concerned, certainly we have now, as far as the PMLN is concerned, overall, as far as Punjab is concerned, things seem to be heading towards provincial elections. Let's see what happens and where things go from there. Overall, of course, we will also know what happens in the local polls scheduled to be held in Sindh tomorrow. Certainly the PPP is geared and ready to go forward regardless of where the MQM stands. Let's see what happens in the next week or so. I think a couple of weeks is perhaps a longer time period. Things seem to be happening much faster. Thank you so much.